Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ansari, and I'm going to be presenting a session on which platform you should use when you're building your next AI agent. The topic of our conversation today is if you're building a chatbot, should you use Copilot Studio, Azure AI Foundry, or Custom GPT? I want to thank our organizers of this event, Wwmstug, for inviting me to present here today, and Microsoft for the platform that we have. And I'm really excited about the presentation that lies ahead of us. Now, to preface, obviously, there are a lot of great platforms out there that can help you build AI agents, and you probably have your own favorite one. But I picked these three specifically because ChatGPT has the incumbent's advantage. They were the ones that got all the attention that really, I think, brought AI agents to the forefront of our conversations. And then being a Microsoft partner and living in the Microsoft ecosystem, of course, it makes sense that the other two platforms I talked about are Copilot Studio and Azure AI Foundry. So let's get started. A little bit about myself. I am the Chief Operating Officer and one of the ownership partners at DSWI. We are a Microsoft partner based out of Houston, Texas, and serving the North American market. We focus on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, the Copilot Studio AI stack, and Power Platform, specifically Power BI and Power Automate. I'm also a Microsoft MVP since 2018, and what that means is I love to learn and I love to share. I'm a product expert in the technologies and in the biz apps area that I work with, but I think that love of learning and sharing is really at the heart of the MVP award and the MVP credential. You can contact me at my QR code that's going to take you to my LinkedIn profile, or of course you can also reach out to me on email or or at our website www.dswius.com. There may have been one more W in here than I need. I also wanted to tell you about Only Copilot Fans. That is a media initiative that I launched late last year. It is a news website, a news and a how-to website on all things related to AI, specifically around Copilot and Copilot Studio. So we do some short-form videos, we do some interviews, but most importantly, we do the how do you do this and what's latest and greatest in the Copilot Studio space. So you can get to us at www.onlycopilotfans.com. All right, folks, so let's get started with some housekeeping. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight, you may have heard the word chatbot, Copilot, agent. There are some nuanced differences between Copilot and agent, but in the context of this conversation, I think they're probably going to be synonymous, and we're going to use this interchangeably, at least in the context of this particular chat. The other thing I wanted to highlight is the Azure AI Foundry. That itself is a platform of platforms, if you will. It is a service that Microsoft offers that allows you to choose a variety of different models from the OpenAI model set, as well as a lot of third-party models. And we have thousands of models that you can really choose from when you're building your agents. So when I talk about Azure AI Foundry, I'm specifically talking about everything that is under the Azure OpenAI service, the Azure AI service, etc. And then lastly, when the first time I did this presentation, I've done this a few times for Microsoft as well, is when you're talking about custom GPT here, I found that there's actually a platform called customgpt.ai. That is not what I'm referring to here. I am talking about ChatGPT from OpenAI and the custom GPTs that you can build using it. So just like to get some of those things cleared away so we're all talking about the same thing and we're on the same page. So with that, let's start going into our list of contenders. You've already heard the names a little bit. I'm going to reintroduce them. And the way this presentation is going to work is I'm actually going to show you a little bit of each of those platforms live. So this isn't just going to be a presentation of slides and bullet points, but I will show you some of the capabilities. You'll see some things that are important, some salient highlights, some differences and some similarities. And then I'm going to compare all the high points and low points of each of those platforms. And then we'll do what I, in some live sessions, like to do is whiteboarding. But since we're pre-recording this, I've kind of already done some of that whiteboarding ahead of time, and I'm going to share with you why you may want to choose one platform over another, because there's never a one size fits all type of solution, is there? It kind of depends on what your needs are, what type of organization you are, etc. So, with that, our list of contenders, the first one, of course, is building custom GPTs with ChatGPT. You see that OpenAI icon over there. You see that, and I think it kind of brings ChatGPT in your mind, anyways. Then the next thing is going to be copilots or agents, as they're called now, with Copilot Studio. And the third thing we're going to look at is building our copilots or agents with the Azure OpenAI service, specifically within the Azure AI Foundry. I'm going to show you a little bit of kind of the Foundry as well, but I think the one we're going to whiff up is going to be in the Azure OpenAI service. And I'll also explain to you what, if you're not familiar with those AI Foundry, OpenAI service, and Azure AI service, etc. When we get there, I'm going to introduce you to those concepts as well. So let's start with our first one, building custom GPTs with ChatGPT. Let's go into a demo first, and then come back and we will look at some of the highlights and the lowlights of what we're seeing. So I'm going to bring up my web browser. I've preloaded some of the stuff. Now I'm in ChatGPT, and right away you can kind of see I'm in that home screen where I can have my conversation with ChatGPT. For those of you who are not familiar with some cool features, even aside from the topic or topics we're going to talk about today, one of those is the ability to select your own data model or foundational model, and you can also make your chat temporary. Those are two things that I love a lot. It gives me some freedom and flexibility. But what you are able to do is create your own GPTs. And those own GPTs that you create can be used to specifically get answers from documents or knowledge sources that are unique to the problem or problems you're trying to solve. As an example, I have one that I'm going to go through over called a Trade Genius, but I'll show you first how easy it is to whip one up, and then we'll go look at something I've already completed, right? The cooking show type of concept where you show a little bit of the ingredients being mixed, and then you pull a semi-prepared or a fully baked cake out of the oven. So we're going to do that, folks. I have a ChatGPT Plus subscription, and when I go over here, there is an area called My GPTs. This is where I would be able to create a GPT, and it is, by the way, capable of doing multiple languages. I was doing this for another presentation. So when you ask it to create a new GPT, it's going to ask you to define it, give an icon, give a name, a description, and then instructions. As AI becomes, or generative AI becomes smarter and smarter, the value of instructions becomes higher and higher. What instructions do is it allows you to speak to the AI LLM or to the foundational model, just like you would speak to a human being, right? And you would be able to specifically tell them, do this, not that. When this happens, do this. When that happens, do that. Now, given the information that it already has, it can reason over and make some decisions for you. However, on occasion, you'll find, because of where we are in the AI technology, not all instructions are going to get followed maybe the way you're expecting, especially if your instructions involve getting data or information from another application or service. You would still then need to make a connection or an action, if you will, that connects to another app or a service, and then it can utilize that. And then you can build in some conversation starters, and these are typically called starter prompts. You can connect it to a knowledge source, and then you can decide what other capabilities you're going to do. So web search, for instance, would allow you to leverage the Google or the Bing effect if the information that it needs is not readily available to it within the knowledge sources you're providing, as well as its own general knowledge that the model has. And then if you do allow web search, you'll look outside, and if you don't, it's going to basically tell you that it doesn't have an answer, or whatever answer it's going to give is going to be through the last date of its training. A good example of that could be if you're asking it a question about who has won the Super Bowl this past February, it would not know without web search that it was the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, unless you have a document that you've uploaded as a file that specifically tells it, because the built-in GPT foundational model, which I believe at this time is still going to be GPT 4.0 that it uses, that was last trade, I believe, until October 2023 or April 2024. And everything that's happened since would not be in its purview or would not be in its knowledge base. Going down, you can also have other things enabled like image generation or canvas, the ability to interpret code and analyze data. And then you could connect it to an external application. So these are actions. Now, here is one thing that I've noticed that actions, when you're trying to do it, it is not going to be a GUI based interface when you're connected to an action. So you would still need to know either JSON or YAML. None of these are very complex. Most people who are, even if you're not a developer, you may actually know some of this, but if you're a developer, you're generally familiar with these scripting type of languages, if you will. But there are some examples. So if you wanted to get the weather from an outside weather application, you could kind of write up this JSON schema. Or there's another one called a YAML, which is basically yet another markup language. For anybody who doesn't know, that's what it stands for. And there's a schema over here, and you can see what the available actions are, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you've already written a JSON or kind of some other type of action, you can import. What's really cool is you could actually leverage ChatGPT to help you come up with a schema in a separate conversation as well. But using these types of actions and then authentications would allow you to get data specifically from a specific knowledge source. All right. Now, coming back in here, let's go and actually look at one last thing I forgot to tell you is you can then also decide if the conversation that your users are having with this agent or with this conversational experience with this chatbot, is that going to be used to train the foundational data, the foundational model, if you will, for ChatGPT? So can it use conversations to improve itself? And you can decide to agree or not to agree. In most cases, if it's a business, you probably will not agree. So let's go look at one that I've already completed. So if I go to my Trade Genius, the way this kind of works is we've got our starter prompts that I've pre-highlighted, and it's got kind of a little byline, the title, a little icon that we've put, and it's able to answer questions about the World Trade Organization, or for instance, how does the WTO dispute settlement work? And the reason it knows this, as I'm going to show you in a minute, is we specifically enabled it with a document that allows it to answer questions about the World Trade Organization. And we've done this as a proof of concept for our attorney who also specializes in international trade. And so as it goes through these questions and answers, it's going to give all these types of details to you. In fact, it's still coming up with some of the answers that it needs. Now, going back, how did this actually work? So let's edit this GPT. And when I edit this GPT, you're going to see that I've got the title, the description, and the instructions. This GPT is an expert in international trade laws and regulations with a strong understanding of guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So this is a fairly, kind of simple set of instructions, just explaining what it is, giving it a personality. Conversation starters, these were those starter prompts you were seeing over here. And then for knowledge, we enabled it with the handbook of deep trade. And so this was a deep trade agreements handbook that we got, and we're specifically using it. Now, ChatGPT may have other pieces of information about this particular concept. And so it is capable of answering from within, but if there's an answer that specifically is covered under this document, it is going to be answering from there. And in an example of an action that we've got over here, we've got a weather action, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a quick walkthrough of what that experience looks like. When it's all said and done, you can deploy this either just for yourself. You can also deploy this to anybody with the link or to the GPT store so that other people can also benefit and there is a publicly available GPT store that allows you to explore and connect to other people's GPTs. So this is a very quick walkthrough of that experience. And let's go back into PowerPoint and summarize some of the things that we've learned with this particular experience. So let's go back in there. All right. So the developer for custom GPTs that we just looked at, that is OpenAI. That's a company that runs all of it. Microsoft has a very heavy interest and influence in OpenAI. They have multiple board seats and got some kind of leadership, ownership stake and equity as well, and a very big contributor to OpenAI, the nonprofit org as well. The solution that we're building is built on ChatGPT's large language model, which is what LLM stands for. And I believe at this point, the foundational LLM that it's using is GPT-4o, and that's what it's getting information from. That's where the general knowledge comes from. we are able to, as you saw, ground the conversation with custom knowledge that we provided. Now, the custom knowledge, however, at this point that it supports is just files. You can enable web search, but the web search is only generic, as in you cannot say only look at this, and this website. And also, today, with custom GPTs, at least not in my experience, I've not been able to connect to SharePoint documents, etc. Although I understand some of those things might be coming if you do actually in your standard chat experience, because they do allow to connect to your OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, and so on. But in the custom GPTs, I haven't seen it yet. And of course, you can build custom actions. And when you build custom actions, though, they're done in JSON or YAML. You can do web search, image generation if that conversation requires it. You can enable or disable that. And as you saw, code interpretation, data analysis. Now, it does keep in conversation memory. What that means is if you have asked a question and you've had a conversation, it's going to remember that conversation until you ask it to forget it or delete that conversation log. And so coming back, questions that you ask, it will remember that context, and you don't have to redefine again and again the underlying conditions as long as you're in the same conversation. What it does lack, a few things that I find are probably not that good about it, is if you are doing this for organizational use. If you're building this for personal use, if you're an individual contributor, if you're a very small business of one or two people and you're not connected to, or you're not requiring things to be secure in the Microsoft tenant, this is going to be just fine. It does not have EDP, which is Enterprise Data Protection. And I'll talk more about it in a little bit, which is basically a promise and a if you will, an undertaking or a commitment from Microsoft. Let's just say a policy and a commitment for Microsoft that your data, your enterprise data, is going to be safe, protected, if not used to train foundational data models, and that it stays, in it kind of securely in, say, the European territory. If you're a Europe-based business, to comply with GDPR rules. In the U.S., it would adhere to other U.S. rules and regulations, etc. The other part is loose guardrails. And so what I mean by loose guardrails is that when you're having a conversation and asking it to do something or asking certain questions, the threshold for what it considers inappropriate is higher than the other two platforms we're going to talk about. And in some ways, GPT is more capable of being jailbroken. Again, there's some fantastic YouTube videos out there that will show you where you could ask it a question that it deems inappropriate about maybe something that is not legal activity. And then you kind of go about it a different way, and you could kind of engineer the conversation a little bit to make it think it's now an actor in a play that's doing these things, and it's going to have a kind of lower, kind of guardrails to answer certain questions that it otherwise wouldn't. I find that the other platforms we're going to look at are a little more secure in what they consider responsible AI behavior. And then from there, the other thing I wanted to highlight too is, unlike the other ones we're going to look at, I find that even with very large document files, PDFs, Word documents, the RAG or retrieval augmented generation, the ability for it to answer questions based on the document that's there, read, understand, and answer in a natural language is better even with larger files than it is, especially with the Copilot Studio. And whatever you're building, you could publish for yourself or for the GPT store. And then the kind of a final couple of thoughts, it's got the lowest learning curve. It's very quick and easy. You don't need to be, I think maybe if you don't know JSON or YAML, you may need some help there. But as I said, you can leverage ChatGPT to help you build the JSON or the YAML schema. It's the quickest time to value. One thing I think I forgot to talk about when I was talking lax EDP and loose guardrails is authentication. When you are building a custom GPT, you have to remember that for deployment, those custom GPTs require some kind of a login, right? Whoever's building it. The login or the authentication, the identity management that it does is going to be Google, a couple of other methods, and the Microsoft method, which is not your Microsoft 365 Entra ID or the work and school type of account that we all use in our organizations. It's the personal Microsoft account, like your Hotmail, Outlook.com type of login. What that means is if you're building something as an organization, as a Microsoft partner, this data is not actually connected to your tenant, or this agent is not connected to your tenant. If the person working on this is let go, you could potentially continue to have access to this or even walk away with the IP that was created. Also, your data is living outside of your Microsoft 365 tenant and you have less control over it. Certainly, OpenAI is also committed to privacy, and I'm not going to, kind of play that focus on privacy down, but it is living in a tenant outside of your own. Like I said, the biggest concern as a business owner and as a kind of somebody who runs an organization, I worry about the most is they do not have to authenticate with the M365, the Entra ID, Azure AD, Azure Active Directory credentials. And so if they leave, they can continue to have credentials to the other stuff and they can walk away with it. So that is something you want to be concerned about. So that is one of the two. The second one that we're going to talk about is Copilot Studio. So let's do a very similar walkthrough like we did the last time. And we're going to do a short demo and then we'll come back and we'll recap all the things that are out there. Now, here I am in Copilot Studio. Copilot Studio is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. Though these environments and so on that you're seeing over here are basically your Power Platform environments where you might be building Power Apps and Power Automate, etc. I have a few agents already that have pre-built. I'm going to spend more time with them like I did in the ChatGPT, but I'll also walk you through the process of creating agents. Now, you can create a lot of different kinds of agents. And what I mean by that is you can create agents that can be published to different channels, or you can also create agents for your organization's own use, like Teams, like Microsoft 365 Copilot, Chat, and so on. So when you're creating an agent, all you do is you come over here, you can either select from a template or you say a new agent. There's also a describe your agent to create it type of mechanism as well. So if I'm over here and I'm saying new agent and I click on new agent, it's going to ask me to describe what it is that I'm creating. And so if I'm creating a similar trade agent, then I could just type in and say, you are an international trade expert that can answer all questions related to the WTO policies, rules, as well as deep trade policies. So, and so on and so forth. I'm not really going to follow through in this entire conversation, but, and the typos and all will clearly understand what it is that I'm doing. I could have changed my language. So as I do this, it's going to build my instructions over here. And then it's going to ask me, is this a good name? I can say sure. And then it'll ask me more questions and I can answer all of that. And it's going to then create an agent for me. So what we're going to do is we'll abandon this process. And for the rest of it, I'm actually going to go to an agent that I've already got. We'll kind of work with that. Now, this agent actually is not for international trade. This agent that I've built is one that I use in some workshops that connects to a Microsoft Dynamics 365 environment. I do have a trade law expert type of agent over here, but let's use this one. I like this a little bit more. It's got a lot going on in there. When we pick this is an agent that we created with similar instructions and then added some knowledge sources. And then we also connected it with some other external applications and more. So this particular experience, as you look, has a description. And this will have some general instructions. So assist customer service representatives with questions on how to perform tasks in Business Central and understand functionality, provide guidance, ensure responses are accurate, avoid discussing topics unrelated to our kind of main conversation stream, maintain a professional supportive, and so on and so forth. But look at this one. This is an interesting instruction because as part of what I'm doing here, I'm going to have it send emails, but I want those emails to automatically adopt HTML formatting and kind of have those line breaks, know when a table is needed, know when to make something bold. I don't need to give it step-by-step instructions, just telling it format all outbound emails in HTML tells it whenever I have an email, I'm going to make it look pretty and nice. And I can add a signature too for outbound stuff. I can make sure that if there's any monetary amounts that follows a format. So instructions can be like this as well, and not just generic instructions on behavior. And I've got this AI orchestration. And what that means is because it has a lot of different things available to it, like knowledge files, a SharePoint, website, or rather SharePoint resource, a website, I think probably even a book I may have, or no, I didn't add a book over here. And then I have some things that are called topics. Topics are another way of orchestrating a conversation. Maybe if you want to create a new calendar event, you want people to be able to fill in a form, and then based on what they fill in, a bunch of things can happen. You do some conditional work over here. I've also got some actions that connect to external applications. I've got a lot of these things happening. So when a user asks a question on, what is the customers, or show me a list of customers, right? How does it know which of these many actions to use to get the answer? And so you have a little activity map. I'm here in a testing mode. When I do this, it's going to actually pull one of the actions called Find Business Central Customer Records. Now I have to re-authenticate. I've been out of here for a little while. I completely forgot to do that. I'd have to go to Manage Connections in my testing and just re-authenticate myself, and everything would work again. But going back up here, the way it knows which action to call to specifically call the Find Business Central cut records as opposed to using one of these is because I've enabled orchestration with AI. And then it looks at that, it looks at the description of some of these things. So if I were to go look at this particular action, I've described what the action is for. And so the action description is going to be retrieves customer records from Dynamics 365 Business Central. It goes, and then the conversation that asked for a list of customers, it goes, oh, this is what I should use because this is what it's about, as opposed to maybe a knowledge source like the API reference second edition guide that I have on SharePoint. And this is going to answer questions related to API pages and APIs. So it knows if there's a question about API, I got to come over here. You can also have it equipped with general knowledge, and general knowledge is basically OpenAI's GPT-4o model. And so when I come over here and I say, hey, allow the AI to use its own general knowledge, it's going to be able to find general information that it already knows until the training cutoff date of the model. Unlike ChatGPT, I cannot have it search the free and open web, but I can give it specific websites that I'd like it to search. And it's going to do a Bing website search within them. So it's important to know that these websites should be properly indexed. So I can pick some website, could be my own website, could be an official source, and whatever it is that I need, and it will only look at those. And for anybody who wants to prioritize which websites get picked first or second, you can use a construct called Bing Custom Search. Bing Custom Search allows you to list all the websites you wanted to be able to search, and then prioritize answers from, or prioritize results, and so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of capability there. And then lastly, I talked a little bit about topics already. There's also the ability to create autonomous triggers. And so autonomous triggers are when the agent unattended can do certain things at a certain point in time, or when there's a response it receives to a Microsoft form, or an email arrives, or a file is created in OneDrive. So it is also an automation type of tool. And if you enable deep reasoning in the setup, what it can then do is look at the incoming request for whatever's happened, reason over maybe if there's an email, what the ask is, and intelligently decide how to handle it using any of the various actions and knowledge sources, et cetera, that it has. So we can do all of that without necessarily having to go through a conversation. And like Copilot or custom GPTs, I can have my starter prompts, and these would show up in a deployment in Microsoft Teams or Microsoft 365 Copilot chat, et cetera. And then ultimately, when you are publishing your experience, you would be able to publish to a variety of channels. So actually, let me not go through the publishing kind of exercise, but here you can see I can deploy to Teams in Microsoft 365, to a demo website, to a mobile app, et cetera, et cetera. And if I wanted to be able to kind of test this in one of these areas after I've deployed it, I can go here to Microsoft 365 Copilot chat, and over here I can see various of the agents that I've created, like a trade law Copilot, or in the other experience, I've created this AI CS customer service agent that we're looking at. So my starter prompt show up over here, and then I can have my conversation with it. It's going to be able to answer things. So all of this to say I can deploy this a wide variety of ways. And if I'm doing this within Teams or Microsoft 365, Copilot, it is going to use my Azure AD or what's now known as the Entra ID authentication method. So all of this is secure. Any of the connections that we have that connect to these external applications, or to my Dynamics 365, or to some other application like Outlook or third party, we can choose if these should utilize the user's credentials or if it should utilize the maker's credential. So end user authentication is going to be the user or the Copilot author authentication. So depending on how you're doing it. Now, if this agent is going to be deployed on your website, you may just want to go ahead and have no authentication required. It could be, and so it could use the maker's authentication to get or source some information. And you can track analytics and a whole lot more. So this gives you a good view of all the things that can be done with Copilot Studio. So let's start recapping. Copilot Studio is developed by Microsoft, runs on a very custom version of OpenAI's GPT large language model, which today I think is GPT 4.0. There's a lot more than it's capable of that I didn't go through today, but let's keep that for now. I can ground this particular agent with custom knowledge from files, from Dataverse, from SharePoint. I actually didn't bring that up, but when I'm looking at knowledge sources and I want to add knowledge, it'll let me select from any of these, drag and drop a file. Plus, there are some advanced connectors as well, Azure AI Search, and so on and so forth. So I can deploy them. I can deploy them in my M365 Copilot chat as well. It's coming back over here. We can build actions with Power Platform connectors, like I showed you the action that lets me get data from Dynamics 365 Business Central. You can use skills and Power Automate flows and more. It does have some limited web search ability. I say limited because it can't search all of the internet, but it can search specific URLs that you authorize it to do. And then you can set various types of authentication, which makes it more secure. You can deploy to a multiple variety of channels like Teams and 365, Slack, Facebook, a website, embedded in a website, etc. There is pricing for use, unlike custom GPTs, where once you build it, there isn't a pricing for it to use. These are going to be a message driven. So each response from the agent is calculated in one or more messages. A message is about a cent, roughly. You can pre-buy packs of messages like 25,000 a month. There's a pack for about $200 US, or you can kind of do pay as you go. And different types of responses can be one message, two messages. Some can be as much as 25, 30 messages. So there is some pricing, but building agents to test, that doesn't cost you anything. And you can build autonomous agents that run unattended. Now, there are some downsides as well, because it is a low code, no code environment, which is great for adoption and for learning. It's very easy to use. But what I find is there's going to be some things you cannot do. So today, you cannot select your own GPT model or your own LLM. You have to go with what's kind of the foundational model embedded. For certain tasks, you can use something called AI Builder, an AI Builder to leverage different GPT or different type of models. But there are limits. Now, the other part is it's got the strongest guardrails in that it is pre-decided for you what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for conversation. And if you don't like it, tough luck. And so because it's meant for organizational use, Microsoft kind of streamlines that the conversation guardrails, or not streamlines, basically set stronger guardrails to make sure conversations are work appropriate. And there'll be things that it won't necessarily be willing to answer for you if it thinks it's outside of the scope of the conversation that you've allowed in instructions, or outside of what Microsoft has told it is things it cannot answer. Now, there are some difficulties you'll face with RAG or with working with large files that contain like a book that's 1,000 pages. Answering questions from the book sometimes may not be that good. So what you have to do then is you can segment or break them down into smaller chapters, etc., and you would get better results. So there's a lot of workarounds. I do another session called Building Better Bots, and I talk about best practices when building bots for better results. So that takes us to our third and our final one, and that is Azure AI Foundry. Azure AI Foundry is what I would consider the pro coders tool for creating AI experiences or agents. And there are some code-based as well, like semantic kernel or creating kind of simple declarative agents with Python in kind of Visual Studio Code. But we're going to focus on this as a platform, Azure AI Foundry. And so let's go take a look at that experience and what that is going to do and look like for us. So the first thing I want to actually, before I go to the Azure AI Foundry, is I want to draw your attention to a place called GitHub Marketplace. And this is not an ad. Why we're here at GitHub Marketplace is it is going to let us see, without signing up for Azure AI Foundry, without having a subscription or an account or putting any money down, we'd be able to see all the different models that are supported by Azure AI Foundry. So this is just github.com/marketplace, or go to GitHub and then github.com, and you can actually pull up, I think, Marketplace from one of these links, or just, yeah, maybe on the homepage there's a link to the marketplace. But here, look under models catalog, and you will see a variety of models that you can choose from. So these are, models that are from Mistral, from Microsoft's own Phi, a whole lot of OpenAI based models, Llama from Meta, even DeepSeek, and a whole lot of different ones that you can work with. And the good thing about this is if you wanted to decide which model you should use for your project and you weren't sure, you could try those out in a playground without paying anything. So if you're not sure for the exercise you're doing, and so maybe you're doing something more mathematical and you need a mathematically strong model, or you need deep reasoning capabilities and you need a reasoning enabled model, or you need something that's going to be low cost and lightweight, and you maybe are looking for a smaller, kind of an O3, O1 mini type of model or something like that, and you want to kind of see how those are. So you could go here and you could say try models in Playground. You will need a free GitHub account to be able to try them. Let me get my GitHub password and username. Sometimes when I go from one place to another, it will forget who I am and require me to re-authenticate. It's just part of its security check and so on. So I need to go in with multi-factor authentication into my GitHub app on my phone. Let's do this very quickly. All right, yes, approve. It should let me in now and ask me later. So here I can select a model and I can compare it side by side. If I don't want to search, I can say show view all the models, and it's going to show me the full list that I could choose from over here or search. Let's just go back in here. I'm going to pick one over here. So I could pick, say, GPT-4o, and then I could compare this with another model. If I wanted to, side by side, compare and pick a certain one. Let's pick DeepSeek V3. So now I can ask it a question. Now there's a limit to how many questions you can ask. It's going to throttle that, but it's going to let you check things for free. So if I wanted to say how many days are between March 31st and June 15, 2025, counting the start and end dates, show me your calculation rate. And the reason I ask this is I've actually seen that some of the older models on occasion make mistakes when they're counting days. So over here, with both of them are showing you work, I go, okay, these are probably both doable. And I can ask other things, and I could see. Now the other part is it can also tell me how much time it took to generate outcomes. So I can see which is faster. I can also see how many messages it used. So the more tokens, the more tokens it's using, the more expensive the model is going to be cost. So I could look at which one's going to be cheaper. And so quality and all that. And I can kind of do a few of these things to test and then decide this is the model that I want to use for my project. And so that's a very important thing to remember as well. Oftentimes people go the Azure AI Foundry route because they want the freedom to choose models, and because they know that different models give them different results and have different costs. So it is important to understand which model is best before you set about your project, unless you already know some of this ahead of time. So with that knowledge, let's go into Azure AI Foundry. Here I am in the general portal, and I'm going to specifically work within this on OpenAI service. The difference between AI services and OpenAI services, AI services are going to show you models from all the different providers, DeepSeek, Meta's Llama, Microsoft's Phi, all the different ones that are out there, Mistral, and you can choose from that large library of models which one you want to go with. OpenAI's service is only going to focus on models from OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT 4o, and so on, or all the different ChatGPT versions. And so that is going to be a more limited set that you have. And because of Microsoft's close cooperation with them, they have this smaller library. So this library, I believe, is going to have about a few hundred, maybe, or 27, models, as opposed to if I were going to the other one, which was the AI services, that's going to have, I think, in the thousands, about 1,800 or 2,000 or so models. So let's just, in the interest of time, I was looking at it on the side. Let's go back and continue with the Azure OpenAI services I intended to. Now, I've already done a little bit of the underlying homework. I'm not going to go through the setup of this. But if you have any questions, reach out. There's clear and good documentation about this, and I've got this set up in a certain geography, etc. So here, I could choose from my various models. Some models are capable of being fine-tuned or trained. Not every model is. So if I say, show me models that can be fine-tuned, it's going to show me that model library that I can pick from, and then I can do some training on it. And when we have a model that we pick, it's then going to allow us to choose, how we're going to do some training or fine tuning on. There's fine tuning and training are two slightly different things. Fine tuning allows you to how you're going to decide how it handles the kind of results, how much variability in the results, and how much liberty it takes in the results, or in some ways, I think what people typically call hallucinations, etc. Whereas with training, you can have it, kind of throw a lot of data at it and give it kind of, a driven training that allows it to see. As a very simple example, I often talk about, you could throw 100 pictures of cats and tell it this is a cat. So the 101st picture of a cat gets recognized. And sometimes you might also give it, things that are not cats and say these are not cats, test it, so on. But I've picked a few models already in my playground. And so when I've come over here, I can choose from some of the models I've pre-selected, which I may have trained or may want to still provide some, do some training on those models. I could select the one that I would like to use for what I'm doing. I could add my instructions over here. I can test my conversation. I can add some data, just like I could connect to a data source, as I was able to in the other experiences, and to upload files, web addresses, Azure AI search, etc., as well. And then I can set some parameters. And so these are where I can kind of control the behavior, the temperature, or the top P, et cetera, type of results. So you have to understand what some of these are, where you can control the randomness of the answers, right? Is this going to give you more specific answers, what probably reduce the likelihood that you're getting an answer if you don't have the right thing to support it? Or are you going to give it greater creativity and freedom to do kind of innovate and come up with different answers, even when the right one isn't there, to maybe use more of its logic and et cetera. So you might want to play with these a little bit to get the right, situation. You can create, go to the assistance area, and in the assistance playground, you can also try out a few different things like a file search, code interpreter, et cetera. Do images if you want image generation, and so on. And if you're using fine tuning over here, when you're working with a model that is fine tuned capable, you can pick the model. You can go through some fine tuning by giving it your own data, et cetera. So I spend the least amount of time here because there's so much where they can be done. You can set up vector stores and whatnot. Let's go through the summary of it. This is probably the most complex of the three models, and it's got the highest ceiling, certainly, than the other ones. But in the interest of time, let's go back into our PowerPoint presentation and start summarizing all the things that are out there for Azure AI Foundry. Also developed by Microsoft, the OpenAI service part, that is, of course, done in conjunction with OpenAI's models. It has access to thousands of models, including DeepSeek, the one that everybody's heard about recently, and Meta's Llama, the Mistral models. You've got OpenAI's models, Microsoft's on Phi, et cetera. Just thousands of models you can choose from that are capable of different things and superior at different things that have different costs, et cetera. You have the ability to fine-tune certain models, not all of them. Some models are trainable. And then you can use these models for chat completion, for audio generation, text-to-speech, speech recognition, et cetera. So this isn't just an LLM that you're working with. These could be diffusion models. These could be different types of models that specialize in different tasks. You can do in a solution. And of course, you can kind of, set up your own embeddings, completions, and more. You're able to allow or restrict web search, image generation within that. You're able to extend guardrails. You can kind of set how much hallucination you will allow for, and you're basically given the greatest flexibility here compared to some of the other ones in these three. There are some third-party solutions that allow even more guardrails. I mean, a good example I'll give is most of these solutions, if you were to ask it to generate a figure of, an image of somebody who's living, maybe not somebody historical, but a famous actor or somebody, it may refuse to do that, right? But there are models out there that will let you do it outside of these three. So that's a good example of another guardrail that may be breachable or not breachable. Pricing for capacity, these can be as less as a tenth of a cent, but as more as, can be a lot more. These are priced by tokens. Tokens are a way of counting how much data is sent back and forth. So every time you're asking a question, if you wanted to remember previous information, you can package all of that and send it by reference or by explicitly sending all of that. And that's a greater package, greater information sent means more tokens used. And then some LLMs by themselves are cheaper. Like DeepSeek is much cheaper than some of the other ones out there. Smaller language models or the mini models are also cheaper than some of the other larger ones, etc. So you have to price and worry about that, but that's how the pricing on these work. And then you have greater flexibility for deployment to a lot of different areas. You can even deploy some of these agents or portions of these agents into a Copilot Studio agent. The downsides are it has got a steep learning curve because it's complex, right? High ceiling, more to learn, and frankly, you don't know how to use all of these tools. Why get? Use the example of a car. You want to buy a Porsche. If you know how to use a stick shift well and you're capable of doing that, and you know how your way around a clutch, then get that. It's more powerful. You're going to get better performance out of it. You'll feel like you're in control. But if you're really not good at that, just get the Porsche with the automatic stick shift or the automatic shifter, right? And so automatic transmission just still gives you all the room, as I've said before, but it doesn't require that much learning and doesn't have that much complexity. So the experience can still be there. So this is probably the Porsche with the manual transmission. It's got the highest ceiling as well. So as I wrap up, let's quickly talk about the whiteboarding thing that I tend to do, when to use which platform. So as I said at the onset, if this were a live session, we'd kind of have this conversational. But since we're recording this, let's go to and look at some things that I highlighted around each of them. Custom GPTs with ChatGPT, I think, is great if you're a single contributor. It gives you full control over things. It's easy to use. You can, use it for yourself. You can deploy things for public use. But I think in an organizational context, if you're building something to sell as an organization and you want organizational control, it's probably not the best tool because it's not going to work with Microsoft authentication methods like Entra ID, which is formerly known as Azure ID. There is no need specifically for, there's no need to learn how to manually orchestrate a conversation. I need to change that whiteboard a little bit from my last session. So it does not have the ability to orchestrate a conversation using topics. Topics are a construct that you found under Copilot Studio. And what it does, it's you say, when somebody asks a question about this, that, or the other, then do a few things. Maybe you want to ask for clarity. Maybe you want to call an action. Maybe you want to run a flow. Maybe you want to only look from one knowledge source. Forget every other knowledge source you have. Just look at that one place. So that is orchestrating the conversation. ChatGPT is not capable of that because it considers itself a much more simplified type of experience. And it's great when you don't need. Oh, now I remember it. So I was saying it's good when you have no need for it. So, or when you do not need access to data in your Microsoft 365 tenant. So you do not need to connect to something that's run on Dataverse or in the Microsoft Graph, on SharePoint, on OneDrive for Business, or your emails, etc. It is very flexible, no doubt. But these are the things I think if you're building something, an HR agent or an agent for your employees might not be the best thing. If you want to kind of to make sure you've got the right authentication, may not be the best thing as well. Let's go to Copilot agents with Copilot Studio. It is great for using within an organization or for an organization. So if you're a company that's building agents to sell or to deploy it for use for your customers or your employees, fantastic. You can deploy it to Teams, you can deploy it to Slack, to Facebook, to your company portal, to your website, any variety of ways, or also use them declaratively in a Copilot for M365 chat. So the standard Copilot chat can be enhanced with your agent as well. It's great when you need to have authentication control. You want it to be locked in with the Azure AD or Entra ID type of stuff. So it's fantastic for that. It's great when you want to work with data that's in your Microsoft 365 tenant. So things that are in your Graph, things in SharePoint, things in Dataverse. It's great when you want to work with Power Platform connectors, things that you're using for Power Automate or Power Apps. ChatGPT's custom GPTs do not work with your Power Platform connectors. So you will be able to use a Power Automate flow, etc. It is fantastic when you want to orchestrate your conversation with topics or with actions, etc. And it is ultimately a low-code, no-code tool, which still makes it very easy to use, but great for organizational use. And of course, one of the downsides to low-code, no-code is there's always going to be a lower ceiling. I would say in most cases, it would get you about 90, 95% of the way, even if you have a complex project. But with the greater the complexity, you might find the last 5-10% may not be so doable readily, and you might want to find some ways like Azure AI, the AI Builder, or some other things, or in some cases, just may not work for you. Finally, Copilots with the OpenAI's Azure OpenAI service in Azure AI Foundry. It's fantastic if you need the most flexibility and you need to pick your own models, and you understand the difference between models and you're willing to spend the time and the money to test it. And if you need to define your own guardrails, right, you need to fine tune or train your model with data. If you're building enterprise level projects, which can have higher costs, I think again, and ultimately, you, the maker, are willing to be a pro. So you are a pro coder, you're willing to learn. And oftentimes, I would say, because of the costs involved and because of complexity, it's great if this is happening at some kind of organizational strategic level. I think Copilot Studio is great for somebody who wants to even try and do it, even if they don't have the mandate. It doesn't cost anything to do it, but the data that they're going to work with is still guaranteed to be safe and secure in your organization. So with that, if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, my QR code is right there, or my LinkedIn short link bit.ly/AJ Ansari. Or you can email me, but I prefer the LinkedIn approach. Sometimes emails, if I'm traveling, that might just get put into my lower priority pile. So LinkedIn is a good place. I respond. I am happy to answer your questions. And find me on dswius.com or copilotfans.com. Once again, thank you very much to Wwmstug for allowing me this opportunity to present for you. Thank you for having me be a part of the Connect experience, and have a wonderful day.